Benefits of empathy. Empathy prevents you from taking things personally.
That's a wonderful place to get to not take anything personally. Yeah, and but that's a journey to get to the place where you quit taking things personally, to really know that other people's expression is about them and it's not about you, and to give yourself empathy when you get triggered, and that's all part of the process of being able to not take anything personally, for you to get the empathy that you need so that you can stay present. And you notice what your triggers are too. What does somebody say that really triggers a reaction in you, and noticing what your reactions are. So it's really a journey in self-awareness and growth. Just, as I've gotten empathy over the years for my reactions, it disarms my reactions. So as the years have gone on, I've gotten more and more present and less triggered. So what used to trigger me 20 years ago no longer triggers me today, because I've done the healing work around that.
So that's when taking things personally is someone has a judgment, a criticism, that we get defensive or it causes us pain, and that through empathy, it sounds like you're saying that you've done work like just empathizing with your own self, and that's kind of made you, I don't know, more resilient or have more space for dealing with those type of criticisms. Or
yeah, that's true. And another thing that I did is, I noticed which judgments would be the most painful for me to receive. And I really looked at those, like maybe somebody would call me selfish. Why was it that would be difficult for me to receive? And it was probably because I wasn't owning that inside myself. That I am selfish, or I am all judgments. So I am selfish, I am rude, I am, not considerate. So I began to work with all those judgments in myself to own those parts of myself that I didn't want to own. And as I owned them, then when people judged me, I was less triggered by them.
Oh, so you would actually look at what was triggering you, and one of them you're saying was judgments that what was the judgment that you're selfish? That you're selfish, and that would trigger you. So what you would do is start looking at that and empathizing with yourself, and that somehow created something. It made you less triggered or less.
Yeah, well, I would give myself empathy for my trigger, but I'd also find within myself where I was selfish, so I would own
I see.
my own selfishness. I would see like, oh yeah, I guess I could be considered selfish there because I take care of my own needs, and then I kind of started becoming compassionate to those judgments inside of myself. Like, yeah, I really like that part of me that takes care of my own needs first. That's not being selfish. That's like a kind of a good quality that I have. It's kind of more like being self-full, because how can you take care of anybody else if you don't take care of yourself first? But in the old days, before I owned that I was selfish, I would feel hurt because I wanted recognition that I cared for others. And actually, back in those days too, I tended to give up my needs and take care of the needs of others. So, and that was really a very destructive MO. To be letting my needs go like that. So I had to learn how to take care of my needs first, and that was a big journey for me.
Okay, so someone says you're selfish. You're looking at that criticism, what's seen as a criticism. Usually, you would be reacting to it and say, "No, I'm not selfish," and and then you'd kind of be sacrificing yourself, trying to please them or whatever. But then exploring that selfishness, you're saying, yeah, I am looking at what my needs are, and there was like a sense of acceptance of that's important to really hear what your own needs are, and that then when someone says you're selfish, you can say, yeah, I'm looking at what my needs are too, or something along those lines.
Yeah, and translating those judgments too into feelings and needs helps you really understand what those judgments mean. Like
Mm.
selfish usually means you take care of your own needs and not other people's needs. You know, inconsiderate means that person wants consideration for their needs. Um, you know, I don't always consider other people's needs. I'm considering my needs, so I can own that I'm inconsiderate at times, and it's not a bad thing to do. You know, there are just certain judgments in our society that have pretty negative connotations, and if you can break those judgments down into feelings and needs, and understand, you know, what the needs are behind someone saying that, then you can not take it personally. You can just give them empathy for it.
Oh, so there's kind of two parts to it. One part is you're looking inside yourself, what's going on with those judgments about you and how you're reacting to those judgments, and kind of empathizing with your own reaction. And then the other part is that you're empathizing with people's judgments. Like, what is your judgment? What's behind the judgment? Let me empathize and hear, and actually translate those judgment to what's behind them.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you can do that, then you're not taking it personally. If you can hear somebody's feelings and needs, if somebody calls you inconsiderate, and you can just say, so you're pretty overwhelmed right now and need consideration for what's going on with you, you're much more likely to not take it personally if you can hear what they're saying in terms of their feelings and needs.
What do you think taking it personally means? For me, I'm thinking that maybe there's some kind of fear in that someone says something, and taking it personally is like having some sort of fear related to that, or do you know what I mean? It's
fear,
like, what is
shame?
Shame? Mm-hmm.
Trigger something in you. Yeah, I think fear or shame were two of the biggest ones. Guilt, maybe. Yeah. Like you're selfish. You might feel really guilty because you've been socialized to think it's better to give than to receive, or and so then you're thinking, oh well, I'm not such a great person because I'm, not giving enough.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just burn themselves out through that kind of thinking. I'm not giving enough. I should be giving more, and they give more and more, and they don't take care of their own needs, and then they become burnt out.
Okay. Is there more then around that was what was our taking it personally? Any other thoughts around taking it personally? That's a big one, because I think that's the whole notion of triggering, in the sense that it's like there's people say something and it sets us off, or me off, and then I'm in defense mode, or I'm in fight or flight or something mode, and maybe that's what taking it personally is maybe getting out of empathy mode. In the sense, I've seen that there's a fight, flight, and freeze response, but that there's the alternative to that is empathy mode. Empathy is actually like a response, in the sense that, if you're judging me, I can, fight it, or I can run away from it, or I can just empathize with that mode, with you and myself, and that's like a whole nother one of the responses.
You can do that sometimes. Sometimes it takes a little bit of healing from past traumas in order to be able to do that, because you're talking about fight, flight, or freeze. Those are patterns that have been set up in us for many, many years. So one thing that's helpful to do is to get the empathy for those patterns, for your fear, and I believe that getting empathy begins to establish new neural connections in your brain, especially between the amygdala and the hippocampus, where sometimes those in PTSD, those nerve endings kind of get stuck. So giving the empathy and getting empathy for the trauma you suffered will help those nerve endings grow, and as those neurons grow, you'll be more and more able to give empathy as a response instead of habitual response of flight or freeze.